Morgen allen. Hi.
I think we're going to commence. It is 9 o'clock. Good morning. I'd like to thank you for a wonderful festivities yesterday and welcome to the second day session. We are on the point number 5 on the internal issues for the Nordic Council, and we're going to start with that. It's going to go, and that will go before the foreign minister's reports. And it says here, put the hammer down. And for 5.1, the control committees for 2005. And I'll give the floor to the chairman of the control committee, Hanadottir. Liv Kari, and you have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you for the floor, and thank you everyone for yesterday. The Control Committee in 2024 have held a total of 4 meetings. We've made an institutional visit to the Norden's House at the Faroe Islands. It's an institution which is an important cultural player and a very central institution in the Faroe Islands. The concerns that we have is the financial situation for the institution, and this goes also for several of the houses of the Nordic region, Norden's Hus, and we need to keep this on the agenda. 2 reviews have been performed, a follow-up of the conclusions from the Danish Audit Office of sufficient control of IT security on Unit 4 of the accounting system. The Council of Ministers took part in the meeting in April to follow up on the audit recommendations, and the Control Committee will be monitoring this quite closely in the future as we move forward. We've also reviewed at the work procedures of the Nordic Council. And there are a couple of reports, the most recent in 2021 by Mats Wolf, where the Control Committee reviews have now followed up on these reports. The Wolf report came with a number of recommendations, and the Control Committee has recommended a template to be produced for new proposals to enhance focus on Nordic benefit. We'd like to review the impact also of the various proposals addressed in the Nordic Council and how these are dealt with nationally and how they are then taken on and are entrenched nationally. And finally, I can also mention that we've also reviewed the 2023 accounts for the party groups with no outstanding remarks. And in addition to the Danish, also the recommendations from the Danish audit, etc. Is there anyone who would like to have a rejoinder on this report? Thank you very much. Any other requests for the floor? Thank you. I have nothing further on my speakers list. Thank you very much, Liv Kari. Does the Assembly adopt 5.1, the annual report from the Control Committee on the activities? Thank you. That's carried. Now we move on then to the final item, which is 5.2, the accounts for 2023. It's the annual accounts, which are part of the total annual report. We've previously approved the written reports on at the thematic session in Torshavn, and the information is available on norden.org in all the details for 2023. I give the floor to Helge Orton, representing the Presidium. You have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
God morgen alle sammen.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. That's just a cough a little bit. I think that we can make this quite quickly and efficiently. The annual report for the Nordic Council and this for 23-24 is it was discussed in the theme session in April, and after that it was confirmed with the accounts and also by the Danish Riksrevision. It is good to say that the Riksrevision has give the correct picture of the Nordic Council's active and passive and financial status for 23-24, and also, or 23 rather, and also that it also is in accordance with the financial statements of the Nordic Council before. And the Control Committee has also handled the accounts and the report also without any comments, and also proposes to the Presidium also to accept and approve these accounts for 2023. And thank you for this. Are there further comments on this? This is not the case. So can the plenary then approve these accounts also for the joint annual statement? This is approved. Thank you. And now we have dealt with point 5 on the internal issues, and that has been concluded. Now we're moving on now to the foreign ministers' reports, and I will remind you of the rules that each minister has 5 minutes for their reports, whereas the next minutes have 3 minutes after that. And other speakers have 2 minutes to speak. And in order to become one of the speakers, you have to hold up your blue-green card, and you can make sure that the Secretariat staff have noted the speaker number. Replies are taken immediately after the minister's speech. The rostrum to my right is where the replies are taken from, and the rostrum to my left is where the replies are answered from. So we have not the same time as we had yesterday, so I'm going to ask for 1 reply after the ministers, and we're going to try and have it from a mix of party groups, and then we're going to have, and then after, right. So we're now going to hear the foreign minister's statements, and we're going to go first. Maria Malmer Stranegard, I beg your pardon, will begin. And she's talked about, you have the floor, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. After only approximately 2 months as the Foreign Minister for Sweden, 2 things have become clearer than others to me. The importance of Nordic cooperation and close cooperation in the Nordic family. That has been very clear from the very outset to me. In the Nordics, we do not only share a common geography and deep social, economic, and cultural ties, but values and interests. Our languages are interconnected and linked. We support human and fundamental rights, democracy, international law, openness, transparency, and international law and trade. When tensions grow in the world, Nordic cohesion is more important than ever. The full-scale invasion of Russia of Ukraine has brought conflict very close to our region, with a lot of humanitarian suffering. In these days, it is a comfort to have good neighbors that can be relied upon. Nordic cooperation contributes to greater international support for our values and interests than when we speak individually. A closer, stronger Nordic cooperation is decisive to the influence potential of our region, both in Europe and globally. Sweden in 2024 is the coordinator for the international foreign and security policy cooperation between our countries, N5. This is a format which is highly prioritized by the Swedish government. Sweden has had 3 main priorities for the N5 cooperation in 2024. The first one deals with the necessity to further deepen our dialogue after the NATO accession of Sweden and Finland. For the first time, we're in a position where all the Nordic countries have made the same security policy choice. It's unique in itself. As members of NATO, new preconditions are created for depth and breadth in the cooperation, and in an even clearer way, we contribute to enhance security and stability in our proximity, but also in Europe and globally. Our ambition is to have a closer security policy cooperation with all democratic countries around the Baltic Sea, including the Baltic states and Germany and Poland as well. In June, together with Finland, we invited the Nordic, Baltic, Polish, and German foreign ministers as a result of this to an informal dinner to discuss more in-depth cooperation around the Baltic Sea. And in May, the Nordic prime ministers met with Chancellor Scholz in Stockholm to discuss, amongst other things, security policy. The second Swedish priority deals with the support for the freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The Nordic countries' very clear condemnation of the Russian aggression has been united, consistent, and has never failed. And we also provide long-term support to Ukraine. We've provided 17 billion euro in financial, military, and humanitarian support so far. And together with our Baltic neighbor countries, we launched a high-level group with expert support for the EU accession of Ukraine. It now constitutes a strategic partner to the Ukraine government. And in May, we held a summit in Stockholm between the Nordic prime ministers and President Zelensky, with an agreement of bilateral security commitments were presented. And the third Swedish priority is to secure continued global support to Ukraine and to the rules-based global order. The Russian war of aggression of Ukraine and the illegal annexation of various territories in Ukraine is a breach of international law. The respect of the UN's Charter and the fundamental rights are basic values for giving the foundation, the pinnacle of our Nordic cooperation, and it's the basis of our message. The Nordic Foreign Affairs went to Nigeria and Ghana, and in February, together with our Baltic neighbors, we went to India to the SINA dialogue. Our messages are clearer, our voices can be heard even better when we speak in one voice. And by deepening our relations with global partners, we lay the foundation for more support for Ukraine and for the rules-based order. Madam Speaker, we've also made joint statements in the N5 grouping, one on the transfer of Palestinian tax funds. We've also expressed support to Norway after the information that the representation in Ramallah had to be closed down with haste, and the accreditation was withdrawn of the country's diplomats by Israel. And our countries work in very close cooperation also at the level of our embassies with the consular cooperation, which enables us to make the most of the best interest of Nordic citizens in crisis situations such as the one in the Middle East currently. Madam Chair, esteemed parliamentarians, at the end of the year we hand over the baton to Finland, and I'm convinced that they will be enthusiastic and ambitious in the continued work to drive the N5 cooperation. Our message is clear. The Nordic cooperation is unique, and it is more important than ever. Together with you, I look forward to continuing to drive and develop this cooperation further, cooperation which only continues to grow in importance. Thank you.
I think that we just have time for one reply, but if we have a question for the Swedish minister, then we should have two now. But it is Veronica Sankesson from Nordic Green Left and Katarina Grönland. Katarina first. Madam Chair and Minister, when Finland voted for the UN resolution in September, it was the argument was that we act in the framework for human rights and international courts, and this is what defines our stance in relation to the atrocities in Gaza, and that we support international court also in its work in all of its aspects. And in Sweden, you did something differently and was not with us. And the question is why? Is not the rule of law also shows the way for Sweden? Sweden thinks that the people in the areas in the Palestine are legal, and does not the minister think that the Nordic voice would be more bit meaningful if we all followed Norway's example in a progressive and way of handling Israel's crimes also? What would it What does it say about the Nordic countries if we have double standards when it comes to human rights and think that all people are not equal? Thank you for that, and we give the floor to the Foreign Minister if she has 2 minutes to reply.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this question. When it comes to the concrete resolution per se, the choice was made there to go beyond the ruling of the International Court. Sweden very clearly supports the International Court, which constitutes a basis for international law and the rules-based global order that we always defend. But this resolution went further, and we and a number of other like-minded, such as Denmark, the UK, and the Netherlands, therefore opted to lay down our votes. Our long-term goal is to accomplish and achieve a negotiated two-state solution, and our assessment was that this would make that objective more difficult to achieve. We take the situation in the Middle East extremely serious, not least when you consider the tremendous human suffering. This is why Sweden has increased the support, humanitarian support, by over $500 million from the 7th of October, and Israel has a right to defense after the atrocious attacks of the 7th of October, but it has to be carried out in accordance with international, and here the International Court, with its ruling, has requirements for provisional measures such as humanitarian access. That's incredibly urgent, and we try to use our voice wherever we can, and so does the Nordic region in a united voice to try and push for enhanced humanitarian access to reduce some of the terrible suffering we're witnessing. Thank you.
Thank you. And now is Katrina Kleveland for the group, and you have 1 minute.
President, utenriksminister.
Chair, Minister, the Nobel Peace Prize this year will go to the organization Hidankia and the survivors in Japan after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The organization on the survivors has been important to maintain also nuclear weapons taboos, and also when it comes to balance of powers between superpowers such as US and China. Russia's invasion of Ukraine also, and we heard from President Zelensky about yesterday. I asked the Foreign Minister, the Swedish Foreign Minister, if they work for national and international regulations of nuclear weapons so that there are demands for also meaningful human controls. We must never use nuclear weapons again.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes, Madam Minister.
Tack så mycket.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of the organization, but we're very pleased to see that there's a reward made of the fight to keep the world free from nuclear arms, and we're behind the initiatives to back the work to try and reduce the threat of nuclear arms, such as the Stockholm Initiative. And we consider it worrying that there's armament processes that we've seen in various countries and deviations from previous agreements. In the week, we addressed this with the Iranian Minister for Foreign Affairs, and we looked at the possibility of working more closely with the IAEA inspectors in the future. And I can assure the Nordic Council that this is very much still an issue which is highly prioritized, and we will intend to continue our work. Thank you.
And we're now moving on. We give the word to the Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen from Denmark. You have the floor, sir.
Och du har 3 minuter.
Tak for det.
Thank you. Chair, Nordic parliamentarians, we are together again then in the Nordist, when we meet very often. Last week we were in Germany, And before that, we were in Moldova and Ukraine, and now we're gathered in Iceland. And I wonder where we're going to meet next week. But we say that good neighbors are important, and that's a prerequisite for meeting. And we have to say that we do meet. And neighbors speak together, help each other, know each other. They understand. They give understanding and a common view of the world. And in the Nordics, we are, in this sense, good neighbors. And when I look out into the world, then the image there is something, unfortunately, that is not the opposite. The contours of the world order is clearer, a bit larger unpredictability, more threats, war in Europe. In this world, our neighborly relations in the Nordics are more important than ever before. In the Nordics, we've reacted to the new threats by standing together. Finland and Sweden's NATO membership strengthens security in the Nordic region. And in the first time since the Kalmar Union, we are together in a defense alliance. This membership strengthens NATO, and our defense becomes stronger, and the Nordic countries can cooperate closer on security policy and defense policy. In the Nordics, we are also the largest contributor also to Ukraine in Europe. This is strong, and it can inspire other countries to follow suit and remind people that Ukraine has need for more and from more. We support Ukraine and also unwaveringly after 24th February 22, and the threats are unfortunately real. These are concerning, but also give the opportunities to hope and a fertile ground for new alliances. Take, for example, the continent such as Africa. In 2050, every fourth person and every third young people will live on the African continent. This requires of us a new approach from us. We should engage us more in that part of the world which is moving forwards, and luckily we have started with that. Earlier in the year, we were together with Ghana and we had a Nordic African foreign minister meeting on a sunny day in Copenhagen, and we stood together about something which is important, is to strengthen our engagement with the African countries and with the equal like-minded partnerships, and to be together with you. And this also creates light in a world which looks very dark, but it gives me hope anyway. And you can't choose your neighbors. But if that would be the case, I have to say that I'm so satisfied with the ones I have. Thank you for your attention.
Takk for det. Og det var mulig for én replikk.
Thank you. And there's an opportunity for one reply to the Minister. It seems it was so clear. It was so clear. Oh, actually, there is one, pardon me. Yes, one reply. You may come up to the rostrum. And it is from the Nordic Youth Council. And pardon me, we don't have your name. Representative of the Nordic Youth Council.
Thank you. My name is Ali Reza. Thank you for the floor. I represent UNR, as you heard, the Youth Council. Yesterday, we sat here at this plenary listening to the speakers, and almost all of them mentioned Russia's aggression and attack on Ukraine and needs to be discussed. However, virtually no one mentioned Israel's attack on and their war on Gaza, where thousands of people have been killed, and many of those killed are children. And my question to the foreign minister is this: does the foreign minister not feel that it is time to put a stop to the Israeli war on Gaza, in particular against civilians and children? And I'd also like to ask if there are any red lines where the foreign minister would be prepared to say, this is it, this is the last thing we will permit Israel to do before it's time for the Nordic region to take action.
Yeah, and the floor to the Minister. Thank you. A very short answer to that is yes. We support, and I'm talking about the Danish President, of course we support Israel's right to defend itself, but also, having said that, also two things. That for the first, that it has to happen into the framework of international law, and also you can see the difference between a terrorist organization and also attacking civil people. And this is also why we have for a long time also supported the UN's all thoughts of also of armistice and whatever, and we are very troubled by the fact that after the Hamas attack, that there now is that we're letting down the Palestinian people. And this is also the background of that we also have a few weeks ago we had a Nordic meeting that we have also talked about the visit to the Knesset and in trying to look at the situation, that even though we see that we are seen as Israel's friends, that we are also very aware of the fact that there are certain ways of going about things, and we're against the thoughts of the thoughts of from the river to the sea. And that is why we have to insist that we have to have also there has to be a stop of the violence, and we have to try to get momentum into the peace process. And what we can see in our engagement is that we are engaged with also in Ramallah, in the Palestinian self-governing governance there, and that is the red line that we have. And we're very troubled at what we've seen recently with the decisions made by the Knesset. Also, our Israeli colleagues saying that certain people are persona non grata, and also the situation in Lebanon, and that Israel does not take the international community seriously. And I have to say that it comes with a complexity. The whole situation comes with a certain complexity.
And now we proceed, and the next speaker is Finland. We have the Finnish Minister for Nordic Cooperation, Anders Adlercreutz. I apologize for my pronunciation. Anders Adlercreutz said the speaker.
That was fine. Thank you very much, Chair. It is easy to agree with Maria Arnestein-Stenegård, who said that Nordic collaboration is unique and more important than ever today. If we look around us and we look at the Nordic model, which is based on collaboration and integrated regions, a strong society and sustainability and everything, and all this builds resilience towards the threats that are ahead of us. But Chair, parliamentarians, colleagues, and dear listeners, the Nordic collaboration has always been important for Finland, and the foreign and security policy collaboration is ever more relevant. All the Nordic countries are members of NATO now, and Russia is striving to increase its influence, amongst others, in the Arctic region and the Baltic Sea. The Nordic region wants to be the world's most integrated region 2030, and this is of central importance also when it comes to security policy. When we're integrated, we collaborate better, cooperate better. Security is more than just an international question that needs international answers. The societal resilience and preparedness is an important part of Nordic cooperation in order to maintain stability in the near regions. Through working with these, we can effectively ward off possible destabilization and hybrid measures. Finland likes to talk about preparedness and resilience. It is something that we have planned very well, and we are going to be a central part of our presidency in the Council of Ministers the coming year. We need military preparedness, but also civilian contingency preparedness. Russia's hybrid measures are towards all of Europe, and the hybrid campaigns are both on the EU's and NATO's agenda. Finland is participating actively in this work in both fora. Here, it is, of course, about preparedness on many levels, such as also as my other portfolio, the Ministry of Education. We also have to educate our children. We have to educate our children so that they are resilient, that they are aware, media aware, that they are able to differentiate between right and wrong, and what is real and what is false. Nordic cooperation supports and completes NATO, and our ability to also work together strengthens the whole alliance. NATO has the correct course in strengthening its deterrent and defense, but a lot more is needed. It's crucial that NATO can defend all Northern Europe. And here also Sweden and Finland as new members also contribute a lot into that whole. Finland is pleased that all Nordic countries are going to put under the JFC Norfolk as quickly as possible. This strengthens all of the Nordic defense, and the transatlantic cooperation is an important part of Nordic security policy cooperation. A strong political and practical support to Ukraine is our priority. The Nordic cooperation about support to Ukraine has been very advantageous, and it is good to act as a group even in the future. We have industry, we have competence, we have capacity to assist. We have to ensure that all allied show their support to Ukraine in a sustainable way with concrete results, and that all allies share the burden. We can say the North can act as an example, as Lars Rasmussen said, that if all of Europe had supported Ukraine as the Nordics have, then probably it would look very different on the front. We appreciate cooperation with the Nordic partners in questions such as about Russia. We share understanding that Russia is the largest direct threat to Euro-Atlantic security and peace and stability in Euro-Atlantic area. The Nordic cooperation is also important in the Middle East, especially when it comes to our citizens. The ongoing military escalation spiral is very alarming. We need more diplomacy and less military actions in the Middle East. Finland supports the two-state solution as the only realistic solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have time for one request for rejoinder. Angelika Bengtsson from Nordic Freedom, you have 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I have the same question to the Finnish minister as I put to the Icelandic Prime Minister yesterday. This year, the Nordic Council has had as its focus the Arctic region. And considering how next year we have a new focus area, my concrete question is this. How do you, Ministers for Foreign Affairs, intend to work to avoid forgetting about the Arctic? It's such an incredibly important part of our region, not least from a security policy perspective. That was a big component of your address a few moments ago, and we have been naive when it comes to the interest of both Russia and China in this region of Arctic. How do you intend to work in practical terms to avoid forgetting about this part of the region? This is both a question and an appeal to you, in fact.
2 minuter.
Thank you. I forgot the words to forget, to have focus on the right things, and to realize that Russia and China, also the climate changes, and our work does not directly get to that. But of course today, we have to bear in mind that the Arctic area is very important. China has noted that, and Russia noted that, and also the Nordics should realize the importance of it. There are security policy interests for the Arctic region, which we perhaps haven't noted as much before, and so that we should have change of attitude when it comes to that. That's true. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And now we go further to the next minister, and that is the Foreign Minister from the Faroes, Høgni Hoita. And you have 3 minutes.
Fru Vorsitter, Fru President.
Madam Chair, Madam President, thank you to the Icelandic presidency for putting the focus on these issues on the top of the agenda for cooperation. We are witnessing the spread of war in Ukraine, in Palestine, every day in Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, with indescribable human suffering in its wake. This is also creating a breach and a violation of international law and all those values we in the Nordic region base our global actions on. Therefore, from an Arctic perspective, this is one of our prime objectives in the Nordic region, that we have to rebuild and uphold the respect of international conventions and the global rules-based society. On paper, at least, we have this possibility. From a North Atlantic Arctic perspective, I would very much recommend that we work based on what we've already produced, the Stoltenberg report and the Gartnason report, that focus on the need to focus on human security, access to security and foreign policy, which is based on the respect for democracy and human rights. In fact, it is all about democratic sustainability. This also means that there's ever greater focus on the North Atlantic region and the Arctic region, and we need to emphasize the need to step up investments, which also go to civil security and cybersecurity. As pointed out by those two reports I mentioned, we can use it for environmental security, shipping security, etc. We need to ensure that we cooperate as much as possible within the Nordic region. And when I talk about democratic sustainability and resilience, this also means that all those nations that are included in the Nordic region, that's the democratic constitution, should also be involved in foreign and security policy matters. It is simply not acceptable. And we agree, of course, that the Nordic region is a very important player at global level for sustainability, and we have to full recognition of all those who need to be involved in decision-making also on foreign policy and defense policy matters in the Nordic region. We tried to do this in the Faroe Islands. We haven't been accepted in all entities yet, so the Nordics really need to think in terms of new international law perceptions, staying away from the 19th century approach. So we need to be involved in those crucial areas which are determinants for peace and security globally. So we need to go from might is a power to rights provides you with influence. That surely has to be our approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have time for one rejoinder, and that is Marius Stockhaus from the K Group. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, the Minister, for your report. The 24th of February 22, then the Russians started its invasion of Ukraine. And yesterday, we heard from President Zelensky which terrible things that's only part of the terrible things that Russia is subjecting the Ukrainian people to. In November 22, the same year as the invasion started, the Faroes extended its fishery agreement with Russia, even though, if I understood correctly, that from the Danish side this was not appreciated. And I can think that when the rest of the democratic world actually boycott Russia in such an extent, then it is a little odd that one of our Nordic countries chooses to extend a fishing agreement with a country that has invaded another in the way that Russia did to Ukraine, which is why I wonder what the Minister thinks about the extension of this fishing agreement.
Thank you. 2 minutes. Thank you for this question. I have also seen what's been written about this in Nordic media, and I understand where your question is coming from. But the situation when it comes to the Faroe Islands is one where the Faroe Islands have implemented all the same sanctions as the EU and the UK and the US have. And we've reduced all relations with Russia as far as possible, reduced to an absolute minimum. It is correct that there has been an extension of agreement, and we've needed to have a consensus on a consistent Ukraine policy. We support Ukraine 100%. We receive and welcome refugees from Ukraine, and we have various sanctions in place which have impacted in many ways the society and community in the Faroe Islands. We had many dealings with Russia before the invasion. We've now reduced it to an absolute minimum, similarly to other Nordic countries, and we stand united with the other Nordic countries in the policies in relation to Russia. I just want to add that the matter of the question you asked is also a fundamental issue for the entire Nordic and Arctic cooperation. What to do with the issues relating to the international rules-based community in the Nordic and the Arctic region. And regardless of this issue, we will, of course, resolve on how we intend to work on the matters concerning Arctic and the North Atlantic. Are we going to revoke all the rules-based agreements, or do we maintain them? Or what should the approach be? And this is something we will have to look at during the upcoming Arctic presidency, and all the Nordic countries will have to resolve on this matter. The breakdown of international rules mustn't spread also to the cooperation in the North Atlantic and the Nordic, which is based on a rules-based approach, of course.
Thank you for the answer, and thank you. We go to the next minister, and that is from Norway, the Norwegian Anne Brett Christensen. You have the floor.
Og du har 3 minutter.
President, de siste månedene har vi vært vitne til.
Thank you, Chair. Over the past few months, we've witnessed a very worrying development in the Russian brutal war of aggression on Ukraine. The attacks on civilians and civil infrastructure have been stepped up, and the same goes for ports and civilian vessels in the Black Sea. Our clear Nordic support to the defense, fight and struggle of Ukraine is more important than ever. Norway is strengthening its support through an Nansen program. We extend the support, and we will add extra support this year. We're in the Nordic region one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine, with leading military competence and technology, and with support to uphold the activities of schools, hospitals and public institutions, and with crucial humanitarian aid and support to the involvement of private business, the private business community. We support the peace formula by Ukraine, which is the basis for a fair and equitable and lasting peace based on international law and the UN Pact. The Russian North Fleet is maintaining its capability at sea and in the air. We have to continue to act clearly and predictably together with our allies. With the entire Nordic region now acceded to NATO, we have a unique opportunity to go more in-depth in our cooperation. We've started the work on establishing military transport corridors from west to east through Norway, Sweden and Finland, and the resilience, total defense and civil continuity preparedness are all interlinked. The bilateral security of supply agreement of Norway with Finland will be updated and developed, and we wish to extend this to cover all of the Nordic countries. Norway has the presidency of the Haga Cooperation in 2024. Here we work together on how the new concept for support to individual countries within NATO can be operationalized and further developed. We need analyses of capability in this relation, in this context, and it can be linked to NORDEFCO, the EU work on military mobility, and the follow-up on NATO's concept for the support for each country. The interest in Arctic is increasing, and China and Russia are working ever closely more together, and the claims of weakness in the existing legal structural framework for cooperation in Arctic are ever to be found, this can in turn contribute to undermining the control of the Arctic states over their own region. It is the Council, the Arctic Council, which may lay and provide the prerequisites for activity in Arctic. With growing geopolitical tension, the Nordic region needs to continue to be principally very clear when it comes to international law. A world order based on international law is decisive for Nordic welfare and security. In few places, international law is under as much pressure as in the Middle East. Ever since the 7th of October of last year, we've witnessed a drama of extraordinary dimensions with a breakdown in all areas of society. Already last year, the UN described the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic. It's catastrophic, and now the number of deaths in Gaza is spiraling out of control. Israel is not letting enough emergency and humanitarian help into Gaza and is constantly providing new obstacles for the UN and aid organizations and their work in Palestine. We see a very difficult development on the West Bank, in Lebanon and northern parts of Israel. The population is caught in the armed conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. We continue to stand united in our demands on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon, on the release of those who have been taken hostage, and regional de-escalation. All parties need to respect their obligation. But with a world on fire, it is important with regions such as the Nordic region to promote international law, freedom and stability. We have greater impact than we would have had if we had acted individually. Thank you very much.
Replikk.
Thank you. Time for one rejoinder, and that's Loriana Delgado from the Nordic Green Left. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the Minister of Cooperation for the report. 20,000 disappeared children, 17,000 murdered children, as many parentless and children who have been amputated without anesthetic in Palestine. And the situation in Palestine is this dreadful? And we could note that the Parliament in Israel has forbidden UNRWA, which means that apart from the genocide, famine, and no energy, no water that has been stopped, then also the little humanitarian help that they've been able to get has been also banned. And I want to impress upon, Norway has been exemplary in its work when it comes to Palestine. I'd like to ask the Cooperation Minister perhaps to express how important it is that the Nordic countries stand together in this, and that they should condemn this ban. The Minister has 2 minutes to answer.
Thank you. And thank you for this question. For small countries in the world, it's very important to ensure that the respect of international law is maintained and upheld. And this is why it's so important for Nordic countries to be firm in principle when there are violations of international law. That is in our own interest, not least. And what we see in the Middle East currently is one country, Israel, which consistently has violated the rules also of war when it comes to allowing humanitarian aid into the civilian population in Gaza and other breaches of international law. The world diplomatic efforts have fallen short. This is a shortcoming that covers us all, and we need to bring every bit of pressure to bear that we possibly can on Israel to ensure that they respect the rules of war. And this is why Norway yesterday took the initiative for work on a UN resolution to ask the ICJ to be more concrete in terms of which obligations the Israelis are required to comply with under international law.
Thank you, Minister. And now we move on till we go to Åland, and it is Katarina Sjögren from Åland, and you have 3 minutes. Madam Chair, dear colleagues, The present security policy situation we'll have to live this with for a longer time. Unfortunately, with the reason that Åland's demilitarization that is being debated in this conjuncture, I would like to say some words about that. The 4th of April 2023, Finland and Åland became members of NATO, which does not affect Åland's status. The resilience has a central role in NATO when it comes to answer to challenges in the ever-changing security policy world. According to Article 3 in the NATO agreement, the NATO's members are also responsible for strengthening the civil preparedness. And here, the civil Nordic preparedness cooperation, such as the Haga Cooperation and Åland's participation in that is important. Åland has a central position in the Baltic Sea. From Åland, you can also control maritime and air traffic. For this reason, Åland is still of strategic importance. Discussions about the Åland's demilitarization and also discussions have been intense during the year, and which is not surprising with the view to the worsened security situation. In these unsecure times, the debate on Åland's situation always come up, and with a view to this, the President of the Republic, 23, also ordered a legal report about the legal position of the Åland people and also the Russians pertaining to Russians consulate in Mariehamn. And the report says that the agreements on demilitarization of Åland has a long agreement which has been many times been confirmed in state praxis. And also it was confirmed after the World War and also after other important political situations or changes such as EU and NATO membership. And also Åland's special position is also seen as set in Europe, and also this is also if in 21 the convention, if the 21 convention would be dismantled. And also, the treaty right now does not give a clear way of dismantling the Article 3, which is about, and also retaining to a Russian consulate in Åland. Åland's a neutral position is a stabilizing factor in the Baltic Sea, and the government of Åland think it's important that no change happens when it comes to Åland's special position. The government says it's very important to adhere to international law, that to this day change Åland's special status would risk and bring about more instability for the stability of the Baltic Sea, and the government continuously is appraising itself of the situation with the situation together with the Finnish Finland and the discussions are excellent, and there's a continuous dialogue in these issues. Thank you very much. Thank you, and we have time for one reply, and it is Evelyn from the S Group.
Tack, fru ordförande.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the head of the Åland government. I have a question on the beautiful Baltic Sea, because the Baltic is under threat for several reasons. It's not just beautiful and significant to many of us who live in its close proximity, where we work and visit the Baltic Sea region, but it is also one of the most polluted seas globally. We've also seen threats to the Baltic Sea, sabotage, and actual security-related threats. So my question to you is this: what do you intend to do to promote a safer, healthier Baltic Sea? And what do we need to do to strengthen our cooperation with others, our neighbors around the Baltic Sea?
The Minister has 2 minutes to reply. Madam Chair, And thank you for the question. When it comes to climate policy and environmental policy, the Baltic Sea, we have many neighbors in the Baltic Sea, and we also have to work internationally with climate policy, environmental policy, and Åland has to, of course, do its part. When it comes to our own government, we have measures when it comes to environmental policy. We have a big archipelago. Also, we are going to have new rules when it comes to waterways. So we're trying to work both locally and internationally as we are many in the region. And on this background is also Nordic collaboration is also important here. We try to do our own part, both locally and internationally. And if anyone knows how important it is, both security policy-wise and also it is the Åland people who live right in the middle of it. Thank you. Thank you to the minister, and thank you to the person asking the question. And now we'll move on, and now we're going to have speak in Icelandic.
Nú hlustum við á síðasta utanríkisráðherrann og það
So here we have the final Minister for Foreign Affairs, Kolbrún Dilvadóttir. You have 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Dear Nordic colleagues and friends, it is an honor to speak as the final minister speaker in this debate. And I'd like to first take the opportunity to thank all my colleagues for their presentations and for laying the basis for enabling Ireland to take part in this important session in the Nordic Council. And what occurs to me first is something that Maria from the Swedish side mentioned, which is how lucky you are as a nation if you have good neighbors. It has rarely been as important as currently. We are currently in the same situation, but we can all be very pleased that we are part of this Nordic family of ours. We share culture and history, widely speaking, as well as the Nordic language. It's important to all of us. And first and foremost, we share a perception of what type of community, of society we want to build and live in, and how we would like the world to be designed with international cooperation, democracy, human rights, both in terms of commercial activities and politically speaking. And this is something that we can discuss. And you are free to decide how you want to live your life without having issues on gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, etc. And we're very lucky to be able to rely on the cooperation and close dialogue we have at all levels between the Nordic countries, from the level of ministers and all the way down to the general public. This community and cohesion has never been as important as right now, when we see enhanced tension between great powers in East and West, war in the Middle East, the unlawful war of aggression in Ukraine, and the threats in Sudan. To be able to stand together and coordinate is decisive for Iceland, and I'm sure that the other Nordic countries would agree. We have made a lot and done a lot together this year. We've worked together. We carried out a trip to Nigeria and Ghana, amongst other things, where the ministers jointly traveled, and it became very clear to me that we are all faced with the same challenges, regardless of which country we come from. The heart of humans is similar in Grimsnö and Sudan, according to poet Thomas Gudmundsson, and it's really all about the resilience of different societies and the way we deal with these challenges, enhanced worsening of tensions. It's about believing in democracy and respecting international law. We are in a good position in the Nordic region, but we need to be very attentive nevertheless. We have to do our homework. I would like to once again thank my fellow minister colleagues for their contributions today, and also thank all those who've been involved in your respective parliaments. And here we promote good relations and strengthening the family bonds. We're in favor of this way of debating, and we feel that we have done good work. Thank you very much. And we have time for one rejoinder. Anna Starbrink from the M Group, Sweden.
Tack för det, president.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your address. I would like to tie this to the matter earlier of the fisheries agreement of the Faroe Islands, since we have extensive, however insufficient, sanctions in place against Russia, and several countries have agreements in place with Russia, which in different ways now are being managed, or that we're trying to potentially revoke to stay in line with the sanctions policy. What is the approach of Iceland on how the Nordic region can deal with these sanctions in the best possible way? My approach is that we should do everything in our might in solidarity with Ukraine to uphold and strengthen the sanctions against Russia. But I'd like very much to hear from the Minister on what the Nordic region could potentially do more.
Takk, og ég gef ráðherranum 2 mínútur til að bregðast við þessu ansvari.
Tack, fru forseti.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes for your reply. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say that we have, of course, in the Nordic region, we are very focused on the decisions from the EU when it comes to sanctions. Iceland has paid close attention at all levels to the requirements, and we want to be very clear in the solidarity we express, which is expected of us. And I'd like to underline that we have to stick to our word. We must not be in breach of any of the sanctions, and we must not revert to business as usual. I know that Putin and others argue in a similar way, where they try to be divisive in terms of trying to divide us in our cooperation. They focus on such effort, and if they see even the smallest possibility, they try to make full use of it. So my approach is very clear. The least we can do is to take a part fully in the sanctions, and we also support the work to try and work with the efforts to strengthen sanctions further. We must use all the tools available to us to the greatest extent possible. We're not involved in the military struggle, but these are the tools that are available to us, these sanctions. And in that manner, we can try and ensure that we prevent Russia from being able to produce and manufacture new arms and continue to be in breach of international law. They've outlined very clearly that they don't intend to stop where they currently are. There's also a hybrid war situation in other parts of the world. Whether you call it a hybrid threat or use some other term, as a democratic country, and as a democratic countries respectful of the international order, these are the tools that we have available to us. Thank you.
Så nu går vi...
Now we will move on. And we have 4 parliamentarians on our speakers list. I hope we have time for everyone. Maybe 3-4 minutes left. First of all, it's Joni Osivaska and you can go there, and Kim As from the S group afterwards.
President,
President, on behalf of the Presidium, I would like to thank the Ministers of Foreign Affairs for their reports. Together, we will support Ukraine and make sure that Ukraine will be high on the international agenda and in the consciousness of our fellow citizens. And together, we will support the democratic forces in Belarus. Dear friends, during the Cold War, we had a good support and cooperation. Today, this is high on the agenda, and I'm glad to see that the ministers see the value of this cooperation. But it's also important to put words into action. The Nordic region has a big strategic and military policy importance. The cooperation is not threatening anyone, but will contribute to stability in our region. This is why the Nordic Council, for a long period, has been a promoter of strengthening this cooperation to include also security and defense policy. We also want to take part in crisis management and crisis preparedness. We also know that the Nordic countries should use the potential by promoting us in the Nordics as one unity or entity. And it's important that we make sure that the Nordic governments do the same. Ministry of Foreign Affairs perhaps have in them to promote their own country, but I think they have everything to gain from being more united together. Each of us are small countries, but together we're a big entity. Nordic solutions are more in demand today than ever before. Thank you very much.
Så Kim As fra S.
Kim As from the S Group, 2 minutes, and after him, Eva Bild from the M Group.
Tak for ordet, og tak til ministrene.
Thank you for the floor, and thank you to the ministers for excellent speeches. And the point of our cooperation is that we are united. We can use Nordic cooperation not only to secure our own region, that's very important. Nevertheless, we are neighbors of aggressive natures, and we need cooperation. But the most important part of Nordic cooperation is that we are able to show the rest of the world that it is possible to cooperate in spite of differences, because we agree on a lot, but we obviously also have differences amongst ourselves, the way we lead our lives and where we are located geographically. But this only means that the cooperation we see this week is not just essential, it is crucial to our own security as much as to the security which we need to work to promote in the rest of the world. We need to be role models for a world where we are needed. We need to show that we stand united in the Nordic region. Thank you.
Og så Eva Bild fra M-gruppen. Hun har 2 minutter.
Eva Bild, M Group, 2 minutes, and Helge Orten from the K Group afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. The topic of this session is security, and we all feel the uncertainty in the world currently. We notice it on an everyday basis, the impact of the war on Ukraine or the terrible situations in the Middle East and eastern parts of Africa. It impacts our belief in the future, but at the same time, we have to allocate a lot of resources to defense capability, and whilst at the same time, we're well aware that peace is not created or maintained through military means only. The appeal from President Zelensky on continued support is very well received by all our peoples. The Nordic region is the classical example of how security and safety can be built with the respect of international law and human rights. Human rights, after all, are universal and need to be respected in every moment, at any point in time. We are truly privileged in the Nordic region. We know and we feel and can feel our human rights in our backbone. To build a future, every person needs to be secure in knowing that human rights also include them. The Finnish government works with a perspective in foreign policy on a value-based realism. For those of us up here in the Nordic region, we need to take as our point of departure that only societies respect respecting norms and standards and international obligations and promoting good relations between people are societies that will truly be able to grow and develop. But we realize that 2/3 of the people in the world live their lives in lack of freedom under authoritarian regimes where they are sacrificed for the power ambitions of the leaders, with ever greater threats and fear pitching people against each other. And I'd like to conclude by saying that as parliamentarians, we need to remind our governments that the Nordics together can do even more and must show our strength even further in international cooperation, for example, in the UN, to promote democracy. We need to do even more for those who fight for human rights in countries struggling for democracy in Russia, in Belarus, or in Afghanistan. And we need to put an end to the violence in the Middle East and get a political process underway for a two-state solution. And we need to listen attentively to the appeal by the Norwegian Prime Minister to his colleagues that we really need to do more to put an end to the war there. Thank you.
Så det Helge Orten fra K-Group.
Helge Orten from the K Group and Veronica Hankasu afterwards. Thank you, President. It is a very gloomy backdrop to the foreign policy discussion we have here, and thank you to the ministers for their addresses. The security policy situation has changed dramatically these last few years, and that is also something that reflects on our discussion in Nordic Council, and it's important in almost all the meetings that we have throughout the year. The Zelensky speech to the Nordic region yesterday showed us the importance of continuing to support Ukraine in the long term and in a predictable way. And it's very clear that the Nordic countries must pave the way and enhance the support whenever that is necessary. Sweden and Finland have become members of NATO. We're very happy about that, and it's very important for the security, not only for Finland and Sweden, but also for the other countries in the Nordic region and for Europe as such, that we now have Sweden and Finland as players and members of NATO. We also have an enhanced cooperation for defense and security. We now have a possibility to also leverage our common resources. And another topic has also been taken up several times in the Nordic Council, and where we can play a very important role. It's to support democratic forces in Belarus and Russia, build up the democracy from inside, not only criticizing but also contribute and take part in the dialogue and include the oppositional forces. Maybe we will hear that this afternoon, where we will have the visit from Tikhanovskaya Belokovska from Belarus. This is also a very important work, and I think that the Nordic Council can contribute to help the democratic forces, those who want to build a democracy, that they have a foothold and have a possibility to present their message. And this is important for all these countries that are moving in a more authoritarian direction. Thank you for your attention. And we now have Veronica Montesola from Nordic Green Left, last person on the speakers list.
Stolen here.
Bästa president, jag ska tala finska.
I will be speaking Finnish.
Valitettavasti ministereiden vastaukset.
Unfortunately, the replies by the ministers, and when it comes to the situation in Gaza, with the exception of the Norwegian minister, all those answers were quite unclear, but we are well used to it already at this stage. For over a year now, we've seen this, and really going well back in time as well. However, esteemed ministers, young people here have shown that they are in the forefront of our day and age, and the comments by the Youth Council were very important. We see clearly that young people are requesting that international law and human rights be respected and upheld. And that goes for all peoples in the same way. Everyone has the same rights and values as human beings, of course, and the young people of this world cannot sit on the sidelines while these double standards are upheld in the Western countries, looking at the suffering we're witnessing in Gaza and Palestine. The suffering of the people of Ukraine is a matter which is of existential importance that we are able to resolve. We need to condemn Russia, but the people of Palestine also suffer similarly. And it is also an existential issue. It's about human dignity and whether it is the same for all of us as human beings. Currently, Israel are attacking in very brutal ways with support and backing from the West, from the Nordic countries, including all the Nordic countries. There are weapons agreements and weapons trade that we are involved in. We have not acted along the lines of what we did when it came to Russia. We need to be able to condemn the brutal war of aggression by Russia, and similarly, we must condemn Israel's brutal breach of international law. As the Norwegian minister stated earlier here today, it is very important that everyone complies with international law, also in the Nordics. Thank you.
Så nå har jeg ikke flere på talerlisten.
There are no one else on the speakers list. I would like to thank you for a very interesting discussion on these speeches. Can you approve the addresses from the Minister of Foreign Affairs? The answer is yes. And we have hereby closed this item on the agenda. Let's move on now to item 7, guest speaker. As parliamentarian in the Nordic region, it's very important to be engaged in democratic development in order to create stability in our close vicinity. Balticum, Belarus, and Ukraine is very important for the Nordic Council, and their situation has been high on our agenda these last few years. I will now move on to English.
Here in Iceland in September 2022, we had an opposition from Belarus that was prime role given to Svetlana Tikhonovskaya, Franak Viakoro, and more from Belarus that came and visited us. We had actually also Karamus's wife here, and we had some parliamentarian and activists from Ukraine. I believe that this was a very important session for us at that time. Since then, we have tried to be in good contact with them all, and we have had the opportunity to meet Ms. Tikhonovskaya often. We had, for example, also a video call for her, or video hilse på skandinavisk, which we showed in our presidium meeting. I had the opportunity to meet her this summer during a democratic festival in Latvia, where we were together in a debate about these issues. So I am so happy and honored that she is willing to be here with us today. Ms. Svetlana Tikhonovskaya, welcome to Iceland and welcome to the Nordic Council session. It is an honor to have you here. We are going to listen to her speech. She will have 10 minutes for her speech, and after that, all the party groups have nominated one person to come to have a short replique, which she will then answer. Svetlana, the floor is yours.
So, dear President Bryndis Haraldsdottir, dear Secretary General Kristina Hafos, Your Excellencies, Ministers, Members of Parliament, dear friends and allies. It's such a pleasure to be back in Iceland. Even though we are 3,000 kilometers from Belarus, it feels like home to me. Iceland may be small in size, but its heart beats strongly for freedom. To all our Nordic friends, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, and Greenland, thank you. Through dark days, you always stood by us. You did not only speak of solidarity, you showed it. You believed in Belarusians long before the world started watching. When the Chernobyl disaster happened, Nordic countries were the first to send humanitarian aid to Belarus. You hosted our kids. You didn't only provide them with a safe space, but also showed them a different world. I was such a kid myself. I spent several summers in Ireland, and I can say for sure that it changed my life forever. Belarus national awakening that we have seen in 2020 wouldn't be possible without Nordic support that lasted for decades. You supported our independent media and human rights defenders, our businesses and educators, civil society and political parties, cultural and green initiatives. You helped us to become the nation we are now. Proud, skilled, hardworking, modest, and very, very European in its essence. And Belarusians take Nordic countries as an example. When you ask an ordinary Belarusian what country you want Belarus to be similar to, he or she will likely mention one of your nations. Belarusians see Nordics as societies of justice and well-being for all, a country for living, to quote my imprisoned husband, Sergei, where everyone is respected, every voice is heard, where the government serves the people, but not vice versa. In May, we held the Swedish-Belarusian conference in Stockholm, and I asked Swedish parliamentarians, why do you care so much about Belarus? I got a clear answer, because we are neighbors. The truth is that Belarus has historically been part of the Nordic Baltic space. We may not share the border, but we share values. Our cultures have been intertwining over centuries, through Vikings' trade routes, through Icelandic missionaries who first baptized our lands. Even in our long and difficult struggle for independence, your countries have always been nearby. It was in Sweden when the Belarusian delegation, more than a century ago, first announced the desire to announce independence from the Russian Empire. And Finland was among the first to recognize Belarusian independence 100 years ago. Belarus and the Nordics share a spirit that doesn't bend to tyranny. I remember in 2020, when I just started my accidental political career, the first foreign leader who visited me in Vilnius was Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg, just a day after I was forced into exile. The very first international video call I had was actually with Nordic Council leadership, and I think Odni Haraldsdottir was there. You told me that then that the world is watching and that the world will be with us as long as we need. I remember the first meeting and incredible energy of Bryndis, who is immediately started advocating for democratic Belarus in parliament assemblies. I remember meeting with Jussi Halla-aho, Speaker of Finnish Parliament, who impressed Belarusians with his almost perfect Belarusian language. Believe me, he actually speaks Belarusian better than many Lukashenko's officials. So many of you have become to me examples of politicians from whom I began to learn. I realized that if you have somebody who cares the same as you care, then everything in politics becomes possible. I couldn't imagine back then that this context will grow into true friendship and partnership. Last year, when the Council of Europe summit took place here in Reykjavik, you invited me to participate, despite rules and procedures, though our country is not a formal member. And I'm so grateful to Tordis for your brave and non-conventional decision back then. Denmark, with partners, launched the International Accountability Platform to collect evidence of Lukashenko's crimes, which will allow prosecutors to bring the dictator to account. Just recently, Norway, joined by Sweden, Iceland, and Denmark, launched the International Humanitarian Fund for Victims of Repressions in Belarus. In parliaments, you have created groups for democratic Belarus, and your governments decided to appoint special envoys to democratic Belarus, not to the regime, showing that you differentiate between people and dictators. And what you are doing for Ukraine is just incredible. I'm so grateful for this as well. What makes Nordics so successful in politics is your courage and readiness to make non-conventional decisions, especially in such non-conventional times as ours. We need Nordic support as never before. We need your powerful voice, your energy, your compassion and solidarity to finish what we have started back in 2020. We need to return Belarus back to Europe, where it historically belongs. We need to release it from Russian claws and stop the vicious circle of repressions. In 2020, Belarusians chose freedom over tyranny, we chose hope over fear, and we chose Europe over Russia. In response, the Russian-sponsored regime in Belarus unleashed the war against our own people. Thousands were jailed, tortured, and beaten, all for daring to believe in better Belarus. Among them is my husband, Sergei. Yesterday, we marked 600 days since I last heard from him. He has been held incommunicado. No letters, no voice, not a single word. I'm actually not sure if he is alive. Same, we don't know what's happening to Maria Kolesnikova, the symbol of our women's protests. Our journalist Igor Losik or lawyer Maxim Znak, who was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Thousands of families have their loved ones trapped as political prisoners. Half a million were forced into exile. But even in exile, they can't be safe. They are wanted through Interpol, deprived of passports, while their families in Belarus are often taken hostages by the KGB. But even now, Belarusians are not giving up. Because of war and repressions, the protests went underground. But people didn't change their mind. People unite in communities, they spread honest news. Even regime's officials are leaking important information to the public. In exile, we formed alternative institutions of power. We have the government in exile, United Transitional Cabinet, and Coordination Council, which works as proto-parliament. In contrast to regime, we work democratically and transparently. We serve Belarusians, both those inside the country and in exile. Soon, we even plan to issue our own passports, and we will ask Nordics to endorse this initiative. Many Belarusians went to defend Ukrainians shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians, and more than 40 gave their lives already. Because we understand that it's not just Ukrainians' war, it's our common war for freedom, and the fates of Belarus and Ukraine are intertwined. The victory of Ukraine might open the new window of opportunity for us too, and we must be ready for that. However, changes in Belarus can come sooner than many can expect. This would be a great help to Ukraine too, and the best sanctions against Putin. Changes in Belarus can spark changes in Russia as well. And together, we can bring these changes closer by strengthening our people, by punishing Putin and Lukashenko. We must show Belarusians that there is an alternative to so-called Ruski Mir. We must show that when the moment comes, the door of Europe will be open to us. Of course, the European Union is our ultimate goal. As our Nobel Prize winner and today's political prisoner Ales Bialiatski wrote, only in Europe can our independence and identity be safe and our nation develop freely. But before that, I propose to include Belarusians in the community of Nordic and Baltic countries. See democratic Belarus as a partner, your ally, your potentially even a member of your community. Supporting the Belarusian democratic movement is not a charity, it's your investment. Free Belarus means stronger Europe. It means stronger Nordics. It means security, stability, and peace across the continent. Often when meeting European politicians, I hear about fatigue. Fatigue of war, fatigue of Belarus, fatigue of Ukraine, and I hear it so often that sometimes I get fatigue of fatigue. Tell about fatigue to Ukrainian soldiers dying in cold trenches. Tell about fatigue to Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk, mother of 2 activists dying in Lukashenko's prison cell. They don't have right to fatigue, neither do we. But to win, we need strategic patience. But more than that, we need strategic consistency. We must be firm and principled, because if we retreat, if we bargain our values and goals for short-term gains, democracy will lose. As we speak about possible peace talks on Ukraine, my biggest fear is that Belarus might be given to Putin as consolation prize. Therefore, I ask you to call for withdrawal of Russian troops not only from Ukraine, but also from Belarus, including nuclear weapons. We must drag Belarus out of the Russian orbit and give Belarusians their country back. Only then we would be able to say that the war is over. Dear Excellencies, today as we open a new chapter in Nordic-Belarus friendship, I came to you with some proposals on what we can do together. First, engage democratic Belarus in the Nordic and Nordic-Baltic community. Formalize the relationship with democratic Belarus. Invite our representatives as observers to your sessions. Engage us in your projects. We want to learn from you, and we want to collaborate. Provide young Belarusians with internships in your offices. Let them learn parliamentarism and good governance. Help us in drafting reforms and the new constitution. Join groups for democratic Belarus in your parliament. We have such in 24 countries already. Let's build ties and connections and prepare Belarus for changes now. Second, support our efforts on releasing political prisoners and helping the repressed. We must keep the topic high on the agenda every single day. Every parliamentarian can take patronage over one of them. We must raise this topic before the UN and OSCE and clearly communicate to the regime. Repressions must stop and political prisoners must be released unconditionally. Third, while isolating the regime, we must support people. And here I ask Nordic countries to provide more scholarships, more visas, exchanges, and training for our journalists, youth, and human rights defenders. Help Belarusians who are fleeing repression with legalization. Help students to study and honest Belarusian businesses to work in your countries. Distinguish between Belarusian people and the regime. Increase assistance to our civil society and organizations. Let's strengthen our cultural cooperation. Let's show our historical connection and ties, translate each other's literature, and rediscover music and cinema. The only independent film festival which existed in Belarus until 2020 and now in exile is called Northern Lights, the festival of Nordic films translated to Belarusian language. And such projects not only connect our nations, but also strengthen Belarusian language and national identity, which is under attack by Russia. Fourth, let's keep the regime accountable. Let's bring perpetrators to justice for crimes against humanity, for crimes against Ukraine. Support Lithuanian referral to the International Criminal Court against Lukashenko's regime. Let's introduce the human rights sanctions package against judges, prosecutors, law enforcers, and propagandists. There were many sanctions for the war. and so little for atrocities against the Belarusian people. No crimes must remain unpunished. And fifth, let's not allow dictators to distract us. Next year, the dictator will reappoint himself as president. We must reject so-called elections as a farce. We must dismantle the criminal regime and call for real, free and fair elections that Belarusian people truly deserve. We must not allow Putin to scare us with nuclear weapons or North Korean soldiers. Ukraine must be provided with everything they need to win this war. Because dictators always see any hesitation, any delay as weakness of democracy. And they not only see, they exploit this weakness to undermine our unity and decisiveness. We must understand one clear thing. Dictators will not stop until we stop them. Because tyranny is like cancer. It grows unless it is removed completely. If just one cancer cell remains, it will return with deadly force. We should fight the cancer of tyranny and not to compromise with it. And democracy is often like air for people who live in democracy. Only when you lose it, you start to suffocate. Many, especially young people in the West, take democracy, free elections, independent courts for granted. Here, I wish to address the Nordic Youth Council. Use the Belarus case as an example to explain the value of democracy in your countries, so people cherish it and protect when it is needed. As Nordic nations, you know from your history that freedom is easy to lose and very hard to get it back. Dear members of the Nordic Council, I understand that changes in Belarus are the task of Belarusian people themselves. But our fight for freedom cannot be won alone. It needs courage, but it needs allies. And many of them are in this room. The Nordics have always valued courage, and I wish you to be brave in decisions and in your actions. Many years ago, you paved the way to freedom for Baltic countries, and now you can pave the way to freedom for Belarusians and Ukrainians. So let's stay united. Let's defend our values. Let's make the dream of peaceful, prosperous, and democratic Europe come true. Belarus is an important part of Europe's past, and probably an even more important part of its future. So let's join our forces to build this future together. Long live Belarus, long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your strong speech and clear signals to us as the Nordic parliamentarians. Now I am going to open up for replies, and I have 4 on the reply list now. So I will ask Svetlana to wait there, yes, and look wait for the questions. The replies have like 1 minute for that, and then Svetlana will have 2 minutes to answer the questions. And first on the reply list is Per-Ann Håkansson from S-gruppen. No. Oh, sorry. Some misunderstanding. It's supposed to be Pinja Perholen from S-gruppen.
Så jag ställer frågan på engelska.
So I'm going to ask in English.
If you'd like to speak your language, we have translators, so.
Okay, I can use English.
Okay.
Dear Mrs. Tiranuska, thank you for the speech and above all for your fight for democracy. When authoritarian leaders silence democracy or wage aggressive wars, it is not only about the control or territorial gains, but also about the attempt to subjugate and strip away the right to a free culture. One way to counter the brutal suppression of civil society and to support active citizenship is through education. Norway stands a valuable example of this among the Nordic countries. Through the Student Satirists program, at least 146 students have been given the opportunity to pursue higher education. And I know you already mentioned a few things, but I would still like to ask, is there are any further ways we can, in the Nordic countries, together and individually, further promote especially academic freedom and support your civil society through that?
Thank you, and I will give Svetlana Tikhonovskaya 2 minutes to answer this.
Thank you for raising this issue, because our students, our younger generation is our future, and it's so important for them to be part of European society, to study in European universities. So I ask you to encourage your universities to give more scholarships to Belarusian students, to give visas, for Belarusian students to have possibility to travel and see and feel this freedom. I just have to say that this year, for the first time in the history of modern Belarus, more students went to study in Russian universities than to European ones. And believe me, we can lose the whole generation of people, because Russian universities are welcoming our students, and many European universities, because Lukashenko made our country co-aggressor, he made our country pariah, they refuse to accept Belarusian students. And it's up to you also to explain your educational system, your universities, how it's important, to invite Belarusian students, for them to feel what Europe is, for them to feel what democracy is, and to bring the European knowledge to future Belarus. So here you can be very helpful. It's, again, it's about scholarships. Also, we have many scientists who also have been fired because of their political positions. They are also now in Europe looking for job, to give some lectures. They also can be engaged in university work. So I encourage you to connect to our communities, educational communities, and maybe start joint projects. It will be fantastic. Thank you for this question.
Thank you very much. And next we have a representative from the Conservative, Ann-Sofia Alm, and after her it's from the Nordisk Grøn Venstre, Veronica Honkasalo.
Thank you, Madam President, and dear Svetlana. The Belarusian regime under Lukashenko has systematically crushed democratic freedoms and human rights. Following the highly disputed 2020 election, peaceful protests were met with brutality. Thousands of Belarusians faced arrests, beatings, torture, and imprisonment. Families have been separated. Political opposition is essentially outlawed, with leaders like Svetlana Tikhonovskaya, who is Belarus' true leader, forced into exile. Civil society and NGOs has been dismantled, creating a climate of fear. The regime's actions has driven many Belarusians to flee the country in search for safety and freedom. The Nordic support for the Belarusians' democratic forces in exile is strong. We know that free Belarus makes us all stronger. We are stronger together. I would like to ask you to tell us again what specific actions or policies you believe the Nordic parliamentarians could champion to increase diplomatic pressure on the Belarusian regime, while also supporting Belarusian civil society and those in exile. You are our neighbors. Your fight for freedom is our fight. Thank you.
What's important for us is to keep Belarus high on agenda, because in this world of turbulence, where so many crises, happening in the world, sometimes Belarus is forgotten, or not in focus. And this is what a dictator wants. He wants Europe and the world forget about us, and commit the atrocities, repressions, without any attention. So if you speak about Belarus in all possible events and fora, if you invite Belarus, representatives of Belarusian democratic forces or civil society, media, human rights defenders on any possible event where it's suitable, it will be great support to us. Again, as I said in my speech, you can launch so many programs together with Belarusians. You can invite our young generation, you can invite our politicians, scholarships, internships, to help us feel more European. And it's so important, for Belarusian people to feel that we are not alone. When Belarus is outspoken, Belarusian democratic forces, Belarusian fight, so people feel energy to continue. Believe me, it's so difficult, to be strong and decisive, and fight for 4 years in a row when you're beloved, when your friends behind the bars. It is exhausting fight, but having allies, having you parliamentarians speaking constantly for us and collaborating, communicating with us, gives us this energy to continue. We can't be in this fight alone. As I said, we need allies, and every of you who say a word for us contribute to our victory. So we have long list of projects, we can do together. So on request, we can share. Of course, we encourage our democratic, people in civil society to collaborate more with the parliamentarians, to be in constant communication. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did we change this? I said Veronica before, so no, okay. You're changing the list, but next is Anna Starbrink. Actually, I had announced that it was Veronica, but you come then next, so please be ready. And after, and then the third is Juho Erola. Anna Starbrink.
Thank you, President. I will ask my question in Swedish, but first I want to express my deep admire and the strong support for your fight for freedom. So thank you for being here.
My question is about the children's situation. Yesterday, the President Zelensky talked about the abducted children that have to come home again, and I know, just as we all do, that children are the bearers of our future, and this, of course, also applies to Belarus. Could you give us an image, a picture of the children's and the young people's situation in Belarus? And what opportunities, possibilities do young people have dared to engage in the fight for freedom and human rights? It's a long-term important work that you do, but we also have to ensure that the younger generations can also continue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I give Mr. Kanoskaya 2 minutes to answer this.
So first of all, I have to say that there are so many talks about abduction of Ukrainian children, to Russia. And I have to say that Lukashenko's regime is also participating in these crimes, and they have to be brought to accountability for these crimes. Many Ukrainian children have been abducted with the help of the regime on Belarusian territory as well. And accountability platform is collecting these evidences, so we can elaborate on this issue as well. Of course, young people in Belarus, they are being brainwashed by Belarusian regime. Many KGB people now working in schools, even in kindergartens, just brainwashing the small children that, Lukashenko is our father, that Russia is our ally, not telling a word about Ukraine, maybe only that they're our enemies, that NATO is our enemy, the whole democratic world is enemy with the false values. So this is what our children hear from this regime. And of course, it's the duty of democratic forces through alternative media, using these modern social networks, to deliver truth and alternative vision to young people. And of course, we using all this possibility, TikTok, Telegram, Instagram, everything, YouTube, we are looking for interesting formats that will be interesting for young generation. But now for young people, there are no space to, to be vocal inside the country, because we have so many minors behind the bars because of 2020 events. And of course, people, young people inside the country, they're also looking for like safe formats, of speaking up about the country. Even speaking Belarusian language in Belarus is also, type of resistance, because Belarusian language, our official language, is almost forbidden in Belarus, because we experience, massive Russification in Belarus, and now people want even to show their protest speaking Belarusian language. And I'm so glad to see TikToks in Belarusian language that are recorded by young people inside the country. So, our new generation is more free, is more open for future, and they understand prosperous perspective of European future for Belarus as well. Now they also have to be mostly underground, but they are more creative, more inventive. And we are, of course, collaborating with young people inside the country. We don't want to be divided into those who are in exile and into those who are in Belarus, not to live in our bubbles, but to have always connection. And that's why we are asking for more opportunities for Belarusian youth in Europe. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running a little bit late in time, but I will make sure that everyone, all the party groups have at least one question, and I would also want to know if UNR wants to come up with a question. Yes, you will be then later on. So next is Veronica Honkasola for Nordisk Grøn Venstre, or then we have Juhula Erola, and then representatives from UNR.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor for us to meet you here at the Nordic Council, and thank you also for your amazing and inspiring speech here today. Earlier this autumn, we had the possibility of meeting in the Finnish Parliament with the Russian opposition members Kara-Murza and Yulia Navalnaya. And Murza's powerful message was that we must not forget the dissidents and opposition politicians in Russia and in Belarus who are risking their lives and safety to bring about change. The message was that European decision makers should be in close contact with them and say loudly that we hear your message. You have very well responded to the questions of what we could concretely do, and I would say, as the chair of the Committee for Culture and Education, that yesterday we were handling a memorandum of students at risk and researchers at risk, and at least in Finland and Norway it's going forward, and we hope that other Nordic countries as well will take these programs. But it's sad how attention in Europe is focused on one spot at a time, and I feel your sorrow for the fact that maybe Europeans are sometimes also forgetting about the suffering in Belarus, and I would ask you what we could do in order to have the public attention and the media attention on the suffering in Belarus.
Thank you. And I will give you, Svetlana, 2 minutes to answer this.
Yeah, it's actually a difficult issue because, attention span is and was rather short. I told in my speech about this fatigue. People, got used already, if I may say so, to brutality, to atrocities, even to murders in Ukraine. They want to live their normal life, forgetting about crises in the world. And I want to repeat that this is what dictators want. They want you to forget. They are brainwashing democratic people, explaining, why do you have to sacrifice your comfortable life and interfere? Why? Because it's moral obligation of every person to support those who are on the front line of the fighting against dictatorship. We Belarusians and Ukrainians, we are not just fighting for our piece of lands. against our local dictators. It's a fight against dictatorship, world dictatorship. We see how dictators are making alliances to support each other. And this is what democratic society and leaders and countries have to do, also show unity. Propaganda will beat very, strongly on your people, trying to look for, persuade you that there are simple answers to difficult questions. There are no so. And that's why I'm also asking ordinary people just to think once again that while you're enjoying your perfect democratic life, that is in danger now. And there are people who are fighting for the values you take for granted. So just grant a couple of minutes of your life, some bucks, donate to Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian army or Belarusian human rights defenders. It doesn't take a lot of your time, but it might save people, in the countries. So we have, through our stories, through Belarus, through Ukraine, we have to explain to democratic people how it's easy to lose what you enjoy every day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then representatives for UNR, and I ask them to be ready. Juha, you have 1 minute for your question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mrs. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Unfortunately, the question which I was thinking to ask was already made by Ann-Sofi Alm, and you already answered it. You said many kind of things what we can do to help you to invite young generation to Nordic Council and speak about the things in Belarus. But if we have to choose just one thing just now, what is the most important thing to do to help you today or maybe tomorrow, if we have to choose just one?
Oh, it's impossible to choose one because all these, things, they are interconnected. Of course, our priority number one is to release political prisoners, but you can't do this by one thing. It's a complex of events, of measures, to make regime weaker, make Belarusian people stronger, and only then we can release people, only then we can release our country. So, I have a long menu actions, what you can do like today or tomorrow. If you don't mind, we can share our contacts, you can choose, from this list.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have talked much about the future and the young people, so I think it's good that the last question comes from the Youth Council here in the Nordic Council, and it's Anni Jentdatter.
Thank you so much for your speech and for your engagement. You're such a great inspiration. As the parliamentarians have already proven, youth and youth politics matters a lot. So my question is, how can youth members from youth parties engage young people in Belarus? And how can we, through civic society, also make a difference?
Thank you. In my cabinet, I have a representative on youth policy. So it's a young lady, wonderful, that is working with young youth organizations all over the world. So I can share her contacts with her, and you can coordinate, collaborate together. She's very active. Young generation is much more active than we are, and I'm so grateful for them. They're really, very, very, motivated. They want better future. They feel more responsibility, I think. So you are our engines for better future, for democratic future. So I will be more than pleased to if you have connections with my representative on youth. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to end with thanking you so much for coming to Iceland and come to our session. It has been wonderful to have you here and hear all of your ideas, and I'm sure we the parliamentarians go home with a lot of ideas, so I hope for further contact and cooperation with you, and good luck to democratic Belarus.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Med disse ord dagspunktet nummer 7.
And now we're on point. Point number 7 is concluded with the guest speaker. And now, moving on, as Odni will chair the meeting.
Så går vi over til neste punkt.
And now we're going to the next point on the agenda, which is then about international cooperation. And to this point, I would like to invite our international guest speakers, welcome them. And on behalf of the Nordic Council, I'd like to express our pleasure to be able to hear your presentations in a moment. And now we're going to welcome our first guest, Sean O'Fergal, President of the Irish Parliament. Sean, come higher. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Madam President, it's a spectacular honour to come to the stage in the immediate aftermath of an address by one of the world's most inspirational political leaders. Svetlana, we are deeply privileged to have you with us here today. Friends, as Speaker of the lower house of the Irish Parliament, it's a great honour to be here and to address you today in Reykjavik during the 76th session of the Nordic Council. And I want to acknowledge first and foremost the warmth of your welcome and the welcome of your speaker, my good friend Birger Armandsson. Ireland has strong foundations of shared values and cooperation with the Nordic region. Accordingly, we enjoy strong partnerships with each of the Nordic countries and members of the Nordic Council. We share a strong commitment to democracy, to human rights, to the rule of law, to open economies, not to mention innovation and education. And as the 87 members of the Nordic Council gather this week to debate the current proposals and hear reports from several Nordic ministers on a range of issues, it is important that we do not forget what is at the forefront of the 76th session. In this regard, considering our current geopolitical realities and the state of uncertainty in which we live, it comes as no surprise that the main theme of this year's session is peace and security in the Arctic. Ireland, as an Arctic-facing nation, is acutely aware of the numerous challenges in the Arctic region, and the Arctic is a key priority under our government's Nordic strategy. Our scientists, through the network of Arctic Researchers Ireland, work closely with their partners in the Nordic region to address the shared climate, marine and environmental issues we all face. Indeed, crisis and conflict, not to mention the growing impact of regional and global threats to democracy, continue to present substantial challenges to the realisation and maintenance of peace and security. It is an ever-present topic of discussion and was also at the heart of the debate at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly conference that we hosted in Dublin earlier this year. While brief, I must, in the course of my remarks, not forget to raise the importance of addressing the dire humanitarian crisis ongoing in the Middle East and in Ukraine, as these conflicts continue to have a disproportionate impact on civilians, particularly women and children. It is imperative that we vigorously work together to achieve peace and peaceful resolutions. As states with tradition of promoting international law, Ireland and members of the Nordic Council have a significant role to play in this regard. As a parliamentarian with democratic legitimacy, I'm also deeply aware of the importance of upholding and promoting democracy in challenging times such as these, and the role that democracy plays in realising peace and security in the Arctic region, and indeed beyond. On this note, I highlight the presence of the leader of the democratic movement in Belarus, Svetlana, as a guest speaker during this week's session. I'm aware that her speech highlighted the importance of Nordic support for democracy in Belarus. Ireland, as a committed member of the UN system and the international community, stands in solidarity with the people of Belarus in holding an autocratic regime to account, and we will continue to do so. In summary, this week's session presents a significant opportunity to bring trust and collaboration, working towards peace and security in the Arctic region and beyond. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate my gratitude for the opportunity to join you today, and I trust your deliberations will be successful. But I want to conclude with one point, and it's a point made frequently in her contribution by Svetlana, and it's this. It's about human courage. And as we gather here today, we think of the courage that Svetlana has demonstrated over years as she has withstood the tyranny of Lukashenko. We think of the courage of the Ukrainian people and the courage demonstrated by Vladimir Zelensky and his co-leaders in government. We think of UNRWA and the work and the courage that they have demonstrated over generations as they have supported the Palestinian people. And we think of Alexei Navalny, who demonstrated extraordinary heroism and courage in Russia. And we say, I think, as a legitimate gathering of politicians here, legitimately elected, we say to the 450 members of the Duma and to the 120 members of the Knesset, where is your moral courage? Where is your voice? Where is your courage to say to your corrupt, rotten leaders, stop the war, let us have peace?
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Caroline Oakes, Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians. At this time of year in the United Kingdom, we wear poppies to remember those who gave their lives in the world wars. And sometimes, in the West, we take for granted that we have fought off war for so many generations. But yesterday, we had the reminder from President Zelensky, and today we have the reminder from Svetlana that actually war is not far away. And today, the world feels a great deal less certain than it has for many decades. And we are right to be scared of that. We assumed that it could not happen here again in Europe. We assumed that it would not impact our children and our women. I come here as the Deputy Speaker of the United Kingdom Parliament to reflect on what binds us, our common values of democracy, of the rule of law, of freedom of speech, of a free press that can say what it wishes, however much we as parliamentarians may at times not like that. And I come here to remember the importance of free and fair elections. And Svetlana reminded us just a few moments ago of what happens when you do not have free and fair elections, and how the cancer of tyranny can become established, and the importance of rooting that out. 2024 is a big year for elections. Sometimes we campaign for change, and sometimes as parliamentarians we campaign very hard for no change. And what matters is that our democratic systems can cope with change when that comes. What matters is that when we have elections, that they are free of interference from malign actors, that they are free from interference from foreign governments, or indeed free from the misinformation that can happen when somebody in his back bedroom gains access to TikTok, the internet, etc., and uses social media to spread lies, to disenfranchise others, and to disillusion us. What scares me is that sometimes in the West we see turnout in elections decrease, which allows that window of opportunity for those who seek to exploit a loophole creep in. It sees extremist parties find it easier to get elected. So it is a privilege to come here to the Nordic Council to remind ourselves that peace and security in the Arctic is a shared concern for all of us who value democracy, and that the UK should play its part in helping in areas of defence and of research to make sure that we can uphold that. Finally, my message. It is an important time that we have democratic institutions that allow new ideas to come to fruition and to flourish, but that we have, as in the words of Svetlana just a few moments ago, we must cherish our democracy. It has been hard won. We must not give it away lightly. Thank you.
Thank you. Og neste taler
The next speaker is Kristel Skalamose, the Vice President of the European Parliament. Thank you. Distinguished members of the Nordic Council and colleagues, I'm happy that I can speak Danish today, and I'm going to. It is a great honor to address you today on behalf of the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and also as a Danish member of the European Parliament. The theme of peace and security is a theme here in the Arctic Sea, and it is not only meaningful for the Nordic region, but also for all of Europe, and that is why it calls for close cooperation, for dialogue, and a shared responsibility. The Arctic has long been a symbol of balance between nature's raw power and human resilience. It is a region where the environment and geopolitics demand our constant attention, but also our cooperation. Here in the Nordic countries, the sense of responsibility to safeguard this unique area is deeply rooted and serves as an inspiration for many of us across Europe. Today, the Arctic region is also on the front lines of both climate change and shifting global security dynamics. Rising temperatures, melting ice caps, and growing economic and military interest from global powers are reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Over the past decade, we have witnessed an alarming escalation in the militarization of the Arctic, particularly by Russia. Military bases, naval exercises, and the deployment of advanced weaponry actions are deeply concerning, not only for the Arctic, but for all of Europe and for global security as a whole. Moreover, China's increased involvement in the Arctic and its strategic alliance with Russia also presents a threat. While we in the European Union and the Nordic countries remain committed to peace and dialogue, we must also be realistic about the need to counter this militarization, and paradoxically also that we also ourselves have to also have our defense capacities to achieve this. It is important that we work together to improve our security frameworks. It's extremely important, but it's not just something that is a Nordic importance, but also European, if not as, and also for NATO. And that is why it is important that we can see also Sweden and Finland now of full members of NATO. Let us use this session to strengthen our alliances, exchange ideas, and reinforce our shared goals of peace, stability, and sustainable development in the Arctic. Nordic nations may not always express their wishes with the same volume as other nations, but there is an undeniable strength in the clarity of the Nordic voices. the voices that reflect strong values, respect and a willingness for diplomacy, and also is followed by a deep commitment to shared cooperation. And this is something which we can all draw inspiration from. Together, from the European Parliament, we can say that we can also ensure that the EU and with the law that the Arctic region will still be not a place for battle, but a place of hope. We hope that this cooperation can also contribute to this, and I would then thank you very much for the invitation to coming to speak here today, and I wish you a good session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Anders Kupčinskas. Did I get that right?
Baltic Assembly.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Chairwoman, dear Madam President, dear Northerners colleagues, dear guests from all parliamentary organizations. I would like to kindly thank you for inviting the Baltic Assembly to participate in your session and for strong and active cooperation through this year. It's truly encouraging to see that despite many challenges we face today, our cooperation and continue, and it's become stronger and stronger. Just 2 weeks ago, the members of Nordic Council visited our Baltic Assembly session in Vilnius, where we focused strengthening Baltic cooperation across different sectors, as well as fostering collaboration among the like-minded nations. The most highlighted topic through this year's session in Baltic Assembly, it was the same, reminding our unwavering support, strong support for Ukraine. This made me think that sometimes we forgot to properly thank our Ukrainian friends for standing on the front line against threat to our cooperation and free Europe. This war is not just about Ukrainians. It's a fight for our future of Europe and shared values that unite us in all this room and all around Europe. Dear friends, supporting Ukraine is more than just solidarity. The Ukrainian people are making incredible sacrifice to defend their homes, facilities against Russian aggression. By giving military, humanitarian and financial aid, we are not only easing their suffering, but also standing up for justice and for the right of nations to decide their own future. Their bravery and resilience deserve our full support. But let us be clear, our support for Ukraine is not just about humanitarian or aid or military assistance. It's about sending a clear message to all the world that aggression and tyranny will not be tolerated at all. By continuing to our support to Ukraine, we are defending the core principle of democracy, human rights and peace. The Baltic Sea and Baltic states see this fight in their own. This year we marked as 35 years anniversary and occasion of our Baltic Way, when 2 million peoples from 3 nations, Latvians, Estonians and Lithuanians, stand in 650 kilometers, 2 million people in one united chain. And we know what it is, occupation, Soviet occupation. And we lived here 50 years. Now we're celebrating 35 years of our independence, 3 nations, independent nations. But the independent should celebrate also the Ukrainians, Belarusians, and other ex-Soviet nations. We should fight for this. And in conclusion, I want to thank you for your support of Ukraine. and countries as well. It is more important than ever we stand together. Our unity sends a powerful message to all the world that we will not back down in the face of aggression. By working together, we can ensure a safer and more stable future for our nation. And let us continue to support each other to remain steadfast in our commitment to peace and democracy. And in the end, I'm finishing the presidency of Baltic Assembly. Next year, the presidency are going to our neighbors, to Latvia. And let me thankful all of you for cooperation, but not cooperation only for this year, not for decades, but for 100 years. Could I recommend you one book, one popular book in Lithuania? It's about our 100 years cooperation. It names it's about our fellowship of our nations around all Baltic Sea. And this popular book is about our Duchess, also Finland Duchess, and Queen of Sweden. And it named Kotryna Jogailaitė. And I recommend you translate to Nordic language, because next year in our parliament, Lithuanian parliament, we named Kotryna Jogailaitė names, years, because 500 years ago she born in Lithuania, in Lithuanian Grand Duchess. And she was our Duchess, and also she was Queen of Sweden. So let fair winds in the Baltics, North and Arctic Sea united us for victories in more than 500 years in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Så skal vi til
And now we're going to Doris Jakobsen Jensen. And she is the chair of the West Nordic Council.
Fru præsident, tak for.
Thank you for the Nordic Council for giving me, as the chair of the West Nordic Council, an opportunity to speak here at our session. And I would like to give you a warm greeting from my colleagues on the Council. Collaboration between the Nordic Council and the West Nordic Council during the last years. The last year has been active and good cooperation. We have taken part in each other's meetings, and we have recently also been active in the Assembly meeting. In the Western Nordic Council, we have as a digitalized world, we took on board 2 recommendations to the West Nordic, also with a view to language policy and also the use of AI to maintain and strengthen West Nordic languages. We have also changed our constitution so that, and our rules, so that we have now our Faroese, Greenlands, and also our others. Delegates can speak their own languages at our meetings and our theme conferences. It means a lot because, for example, my mother tongue is Greenlandic, and it is very different to the Germanic languages. Our point is that it is important so that members can participate in the democratic processes on an equal basis, but also in a manner that also protects our small languages in an increasingly digitized world. In the coming years, our theme is transport in the West Nordics. In 2025, the West Nordic Council has also celebration, and we are proud of it. And the Council also has an important role in. And also in this conjuncture, the West Nordic Council also has made two statements this year. One statement is about West Nordic Council's supporting Greenlandic women in their fight for recognition and justice, and because of what they have been subjected to. And the other statement is about that West Nordic Council supports full membership for the Faroes and Greenland in the Nordic Council. This has been a wish from the Faroes side since 1945, and also the West Nordic Council supports the Faroese and Greenland's also wish to become full members. When we talk about this in the West Nordic Council, it is not big to criticize or get involved in the Nordic Council's internal work, but to support, to strengthen the Nordic cooperation in conjunction with changes in the Helsinki Agreement. The West Nordic Council sees this as its role to act as a mediator when it comes to West Nordic interests in Nordic cooperation. Thank you for the floor.
Takk for det, Doris. Og neste taler
Thank you. Alfons Røbrom, President of the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference, is the next speaker.
President, kära
Chair, esteemed colleagues, friends. At the Parliamentarian Baltic Sea Conference, we would like to present our greetings. From the BSPC, we appreciate the opportunity to further strengthen the strong ties between the Nordic Council and the BSPC. Several members here are also members of the Permanent Committee of the BSPC and our working committees, and vice versa. These personal ties promote friendship, cooperation, and are exchanges of particular value in these challenging times. I'm here today in my capacity as president for the BSPC, but I'm also here as an individual from the Åland Islands. And as such, I particularly appreciate these international parliamentary cooperations. The reason being, of course, that the Åland Islands is a self-governing group of islands in the Baltic Sea, and we know that through cooperation, we all gain strength. The Åland Island is also an excellent example of a peaceful solution to what could have turned into violent conflict. But thanks to international agreements, the Åland Islands today is demilitarized, neutral, and with guaranteed autonomy in the Baltic Sea. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the situation, but when we live in a day and age such as this, with conflicts escalating around the world, we heard examples only yesterday from President Zelensky. It's ever more important, I believe, to mention that the world needs to see examples of peaceful solutions. We need to all stand up and fight for the international law, which is the network which binds countries and regions together. This year, the Nordic Council is focusing on peace and security in the Arctic region, and this is, of course, very necessary and highly required. We are faced with epic challenges such as loss of biological diversity, escalating conflict, and geopolitical tension. It reminds us of the need to discuss. In Helsingør, at the most recent BSPC conference, we addressed these challenges that we're faced with, including the safeguard of democracy and strengthening social cohesion. In our most recent BSPC resolution, we've expressed strong support to strengthen the protection of our shared infrastructure and the marine areas we share, whilst we need forcefully to focus on the existential environmental and climate challenges which know no national boundaries. In this context, we also need to continuously strengthen our democracy's resilience in a time of disinformation, mixing of facts and opinions, and concern around worrying reports of young people losing confidence in our democratic system. The BSPC is greatly involved in ensuring active participation by our youth in the development of our region. In this context, it's worth repeating that the ongoing crisis in Belarus and the Russian war of aggression on Ukraine are not only attacks on individual peoples and their territorial integrity, but also an ongoing attack on democratic values. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya mentioned this as the cancer of tyranny, underlining the importance of cooperation between free, democratically elected parliaments. BSPC will continue to take every opportunity to uphold democracy and human rights, and this is something that we know the Nordic Council also shares as willingness to strive towards this. Let's continue to work together today and in the future for peace, security, and sustainability. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Pim van Balkom, President of the Benelux Parliament.
Dear President, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here in Reykjavik, and on behalf of the Benelux Parliament and in my capacity as President of that Parliament, I would like to express my gratitude to the hosts of the Nordic Council for inviting our delegation to this meeting. I came to Reykjavik to underline the importance of regional cooperation, important to support democratic forces, and I think, and I'm convinced, that's the best answer to dictators, and if we stand firm in that sense. And in this context, President, our contacts with the Nordic Council are one of the most successful forms of interparliamentary cooperation. In April, the Benelux Parliament was already welcomed as a guest during the thematic session at the Faroe Islands on security, peace and contingency in the Nordic Atlantic. In August, the President of the Dutch delegation to the Benelux Parliament attended the 33rd Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference in Elsinore. At both meetings, we discussed the rising tensions in the Baltics and the North Sea area, increased cyber attacks, sabotage of energy supplies, and other critical infrastructure. And these tensions call for cooperation within NATO, the Nordics, the Benelux and the Baltic Sea region. At the April 2023 North Sea Summit in Ostende, the heads of states and government of Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Denmark, Ireland, Norway and Luxembourg, together with the President of the European Commission, have signed a declaration to secure our critical infrastructure in the North Sea. Arrangements have been made regarding the security of wind farms, including the deployment of drones, and there will be enhanced cooperation with the EU and NATO in this domain. We need further strengthening regional cooperation, such as the Benelux cooperation and the cooperation among Baltic states and the Nordic Council. Last week, the Benelux Parliament organized a conference in Ostende where the authorities and stakeholders presented their opinions on security in the North Sea ports and security of the North Sea area, where data cables, wind farms, gas pipelines need to be protected. And a delegation of the Nordic Council, the Baltic Assembly, the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference and the British Irish Assembly participated to that conference. Finally, with the permission, President, a totally different topic. I want to draw your attention on the recognition of academic and professional certificates. In 2018, the Baltic and Benelux countries concluded an agreement on automatic mutual recognition of higher education and qualifications. in regulated professions. And I know the Nordic region is also interested in this topic. I very much welcome the request of the politicians of the Nordic region for progress towards automatic and mutual recognition of higher education qualifications throughout all regions. Dear colleagues, when the EU becomes, and against the background of the current internal situations and frictions, if the EU becomes a subject of criticism, the need for increased regional cooperation becomes more important. Regional cooperation is no longer an option, but a necessity. Europe's future will depend on the regional dimensions, and regional interparliamentary assemblies such as the Benelux Parliament and the Nordic Council can play an important role in this respect. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Og så skal við til Njáll Trausti Friðbertsson, Head of the Icelandic Delegation of the NATO Parliament Assembly. Vær så god.
We in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, we make a lot of reports. I'm the General Rapporteur for the Science and Technology Committee, and what Mr. Ballikum was talking about, for example, we made a report that I'm signed for last year about maritime critical infrastructure, about the fiber cables and the gas and oil lines, pipes at sea. So that might be interesting to many of you to look at. Men, kære venner, jeg vil snakke på engelsk.
Dear friends, I'm going to speak in English.
I would like to congratulate the Nordic Council for its consistent efforts to strengthen Nordic state cooperation. Stronger Nordic cooperation is an investment in the region's peace and stability. Unfortunately, as Nordic nations have drawn closer, the security environment surrounding our region has degraded significantly. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war in Ukraine has fundamentally transformed the Euro-Atlantic security environment. Examples of this abound here in the Nordic region, what can also be called NATO's northern flank. NATO northern flank is changing rapidly. The Arctic region, post-Cold War motto, high north, low tensions, is being steadily degraded by a new reality of heated geopolitics, increased regional militarization, and grey zone brinkmanship. Sweden's accession to NATO earlier this year, following Finland in 2023, however, alters the strategic balance in the Baltic Sea and the High North. This is good for the Nordic nations, and it is good for NATO. Finland and Sweden in NATO also bring closer political cooperation, including closer interparliamentary diplomacy and cooperation at the NATO's Parliamentary Assembly. Parliamentary cooperation among NATO governments is essential. Parliaments are a direct link between voters and their governments. NATO's key purpose is to ensure collective defense against all threats from all directions. And the transatlantic bond is indispensable to Allied security. Allies' shared values, however, of individual liberty, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law have always been and will always be the glue of the transatlantic bond. So stronger cooperation among our most democratic institutions must remain a focus. Closer cooperation with the Nordic Council and the NATO PA reinforces Nordic interests. NATO advocates a 360-degree approach to security. A key approach to implementing this lies in allies' regional expertise. Nordic allies are leading NATO's adaptation across the Nordic region. Our Assembly looks forward to working more closely with all of you to guarantee NATO's new Nordic efforts align with Nordic states' interests. Together, we can ensure the enduring character of this region's long-standing peace and stability. Thank you. Tack.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Jette Waldinger Thiering, Vice President of the Schleswig-Holstein Parliament.
Fru Præsident, kære kolleger, mine damer og herrer.
On behalf of the Schleswig-Holstein Parliament, I'd like to thank for the invitation to the Nordic Council. This gives us a valuable opportunity to exchange and learn from each other, and also deepen our cross-border cooperation. And this is important also for Schleswig-Holstein. It is not only an advantage for cooperation, but also a foundation for a long tradition and of good neighborliness. And also we have common values such as democracy, freedom, and respect for human rights. In particular, particularly in a time where these values are challenged all over the world. It is very important that we in the Nordics stand together. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine is a large and present and new threat to us in this region. The Baltic region, security, and our democratic societies and the protection of our common values is more important today than ever before. Schleswig-Holstein, can look at a successful cooperation history. All democratic groups in our states and our parliament have participated in Nordic arrangements, in events in recent years, and also had been given insights, and we're always prepared, and we're always welcome in these discussions. The discussions and exchanges of views is in subjects such as energy, digitalization, and sustainable development have opened lots of big perspectives for us as well. As the Vice President for this for Schleswig-Holstein, I have the opportunity to receive the Danish royal couple, and it has made a very big impression on me, in particular in our historical neighbor country. It is clear that we today work closely together, free from nationalism and those kinds of ideologies. This peaceful coexistence is not self-explanatory, but also after decades of cooperation and trust. Security and cooperation are reliant on close cooperation. The Nordics and the Baltic area is not just a symbol; it's a symbol of our cooperation, but also a strategically important area, so that we should be able to use together. It is about energy security, whether it's about also these subjects such as environmental security. The Baltic Sea and the Nordics, we get a lot from that, but we need to have a common engagement also to protect it. And we also talk about culture and innovation and sustainable development, and Schleswig-Holstein has an active role to play as a builder of bridges between Germany and the Nordic countries. Our Nordic neighbors are innovative also when it comes to the climate and the environment, are role models and give us also inspiration. We should have models to give new or to learn from each other. And I would like to hold and say that I'm very moved by what President Zelensky and also what Svetlana said to us. And democracy and peace are not self-evident. We in the Nordics have both. Let us, with open arms, receive those who want to learn from us, but also because a peaceful society and respect for different views and democracies that respect human rights and equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Claire Baker, member of the Scottish Parliament.
Thank you, and good morning to all members and guests. As a member of the Scottish Parliament, I'm delighted to be joining you at this conference on behalf and speaking to you on behalf of the Scottish Parliament delegation. This is the third time that the Scottish Parliament representatives have attended, and alongside my colleagues Ariane Burgess MSP and Kenneth Gibson MSP, I would like to thank you all for the kind invitation to be here. It is a valuable opportunity for us to build on the links between the Scottish Parliament and the Nordic Council, connections that strengthen our ties and enrich our understanding of each other's communities and society. The Scottish Parliament this year marked its 25th anniversary. We are still a relatively young Parliament, certainly true as I speak to you in Iceland's Parliament, one of the oldest surviving parliaments in the world, having been founded in 930. But on the creation of our Parliament, we drew from the example of Nordic parliaments, adopting models of governance, democratic practices, and crucially, public engagement. So much so that parliaments now come across the world to see our Public Petitions Committee. The Scottish Parliament and the Nordic countries regularly have knowledge exchanges, both on a parliamentarian and official level, most recently with the Presidiums of Faroe Island and Greenland, as well as officials in Sweden, Norway and Denmark. The opportunity to attend the Council provides us with greater insight and opportunity for discussion, which is greatly appreciated. We share a rich history of social welfare and environmental stewardship with the Nordic countries. We value the Nordic Council's commitment to cross-border cooperation through its committees, tackling the substantial issues of our time: climate change and achieving a just transition, social welfare and delivering a fairer society, security and human rights, challenges that we are all dealing with. We recognise the value of diverse voices coming together to solve complex challenges. Across our delegation this week, we have conveners of 3 Scottish Parliament committees: myself from the Economy and Fair Work Committee, Kenneth Gibson from Finance and Public Administration Committee, and Ariane Burgess, who chairs the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee. We very much welcome this opportunity to share our experiences and learn from the Nordic committees. There is great potential for the Scottish Parliament to work with the Council and parliaments within the Nordics to increase understanding and share knowledge. So on behalf of all members of the Scottish Parliament, I extend our very best wishes to the Nordic Council and an invitation to you all and parliamentary delegations to come and visit our Parliament in Edinburgh, where we would be much delighted to welcome you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Nú har jag inte fler talare.
I have no more speakers on the speakers list, and I would like to thank you for a very interesting and fruitful debate. And in particular, I'd like to thank our international guests for their good and important presentations. Thank you. But now we have something from the communications department to tell us something.
Ja, han sier det. Det om fellesbildet.
Ja, vi ska ta en bild.
We're going to take a picture of everyone, and we'd like everyone who is in the room, that is, we'd like all the parliamentarians to come and stand up here on the stage, around the table and around the rostrum, on the steps in the front. And we'd also, and the rest of you could like to fill up here. We've got the photographer here up in the corner on the balcony there. And after that picture, then everyone will go. Those who are not parliamentarians will leave the room, and we will take a picture with just the parliamentarians. Thank you very much.
Do something about that.